Hey guys, Marsegan here, bringing another Dragon Ball Z Dokkan battle video, and so today I am going to be doing a top 10 EZA TUR list for global. It's been a while since we've actually done one of these. I went to check back when we were talking about the new Universe 6 EZAs on stream the other day, and I have not done one of these since the end of 2023, so this will be the first one since then. I think the reason why I haven't jumped on doing one of these in a little while is things haven't really changed in the first 2 months of the year, really up until now, right? Global has seen a couple of disappointing EZAs like the Transforming Vegeta and STR Jiren, which didn't really shake up the list at all. Other units may have moved up and down, but it was kind of the same units that we would see on the list. But with the release of the Universe 6 EZAs, Rose bringing super bosses to global, the meta has changed at least somewhat, a little bit. So I wanted to redo a top 10 list. I've deliberately started with this guy right here on the screen because I know some people straight away are going to see this and be like, what? In Rose? But he's up on the screen more as a bit of an honourable mention as we talk about slot number 10. So before we jump into the top 10 list, bear in mind, as I always say in these tier lists I do for fun. They are based solely on my own experience with the game. That may differ to yours, so if I've had a unit that I feel has performed really badly for me, that you think is super good and always performs really well for you, maybe they'll be in a different place on my list than they would be on yours, and that's okay. You know, at the end of the day, everyone has different opinions. I welcome all your guys' discussion and feedback and stuff down below in the comments, as long as you keep it chill and civil. It's annoying that I have to say that, like, in these tier list videos for that, like, 0.1% of people that will get really, like, you know, weird in the comments. Most times people are cool, and I like reading your guys' lists and your explanations for why you would have different units in different places to me. You know, like I said, all my opinion at the end of the day. I'm not really tied to any of these positions. If anyone wants to post their reasons down below why you think units would be switched from one position to another, I always enjoy seeing those, and you never know, you might even change my mind. So we're going to jump in here, starting at the bottom of the list at number 10. And I kind of like cheated a little bit in the sense that I've put a couple of units in the slot at number 10 at the bottom, because I think you could make a case that any of these guys could just about make the bottom of the list, depending on, of course, you know, how you would have the units above them, whether you'd have anyone else that I don't have. Maybe these guys would obviously drop off the bottom. But the reason why I started with the In Goku Black up on the screen here is, of course, we do have the release of the new physical Rose Goku Black, who's a new 200% leader for him, obviously a good link partner for him. And when you look at the content that we have at the moment on global, because remember, this is a tier list for global, so we're not taking into account how these units perform in the content that's out on JP right now that isn't out on global yet, although it is worth considering how that would affect this list in the future. This is a list for what we have right now, and with the two hardest fights on global being Zamasu and Omega, I mean, Zamasu invalidates a large amount of the roster with his, like, turn 1 AoEs, but Omega, this guy can be really good, right? He has type advantage in the first phase. You can start getting some build up with him. Sometimes you have to get lucky with the RNG for the additionals, because of course if you're not fighting a super class enemy, he doesn't get the built-in additionals from his passive. But once he gets up to the transformation, he's gotten a couple of supers under his belt, and then potentially you're getting the physical Rose transformation with the domain that gives everybody a buff. This guy can end up looking pretty good. So like I say, he's not going to be climbing to any higher spots. He might not even make the 10, depending on what you think of the other units that are down here at this sort of bottom spot. But I think he has at least some kind of argument for being number 10, potentially, thanks to Goku Black and his team, right? Because a lot of these guys have gotten buffs thanks to other units and other teams, right, coming out or taking precedence because new units have buffed other teams. So one of the other ones is, of course, the Vados. Vados is a very, very good EZA who can be very effective on teams, not just Universe 6, but on teams with Realm of Gods characters. I'm actually going to do a video using her. I had a couple of people tell me to try it out, right? Using her as a replacement for Chilai on a Zamasu team, because she is on Realm of Gods, so she can go on Zamasu's lead. She creates rainbow orbs because there's Realm of Gods allies in the same turn, and then those rainbow orbs are obviously very useful for physical Goku Black, so he can get all of his attacks, and she's supporting Realm of Gods. She has the dodge, she has the one-time heal that's really easy to get. Honestly, I could put her higher on the list, but as a support unit that obviously dies to Big Boss super attacks, it's tricky to kind of place her, because you could get a run where that 70% dodge just goes off every single time, and then she's there providing support, rainbow orb changing, all that kind of stuff, and then never taking any damage. But then, of course, it's the UI Goku curse, right? Even with a 70% chance to dodge, she could just immediately eat the first super that comes at her in the event, and you get killed. So it's kind of difficult to place units that are very RNG reliant on a tier list. I'll talk about that more. I'm sure I'm going to do a top 10 TURs, like the Dokkan Fest exclusive TURs, so I'm sure we'll talk all about RNG more when we get to where we decide to put physical Rosé. But Vados definitely very, very good. And then the other unit that is in contention for the 10 spot is Piccolo. Some people might disagree with him being this low, but the thing is, he has useful tech like stacking and a scouter, but I just feel like on the teams that you're running at the moment, like the top teams in the game, I feel like he just doesn't have a place on those teams, right? Like I can't remember the last time I actually used him. So whilst he can be useful, he is also a stacker, which means early on in the difficult content from the worldwide, it's very difficult for him to manage because he needs to build up that defense. Omega obviously can be useful because the scouter, he'll tell you where the super is, so at least he's not getting hit by it in the first couple of turns. Tech Omega can be attack lowered, so he can get some decent build up and be good against Omega. And of course the final phase is int, but the second phase is STR, so depending on how your RNG goes with additionals and stuff like that, whilst you can keep him away from a super because he does have the scouter ability, it depends, like AoEs and then the normals from Omega, if he hasn't gotten a lot of build up, can potentially be an issue. He could definitely still be good, but like I say, I don't find myself really ever using him anymore, so he's kind of hovering around this bottom of the list, sort of top, bottom 10, like the final one, honorable mention kind of section. But let me know what you guys think down below, of course, for physical Piccolo. So moving on to the rest of the numbered spots, we have number 9, physical Beerus. Physical Beerus is, I think, still pretty good. Now we got, of course, the worldwide celebration having a bunch of Realm of Gods enemies, which was really good for his passive for the rainbow orb changing. Omega does not come under that, so he's a little bit more difficult to use there. But with the release of Vados, we already mentioned, she can be super, super good for this Beerus because she provides him with a decent amount of support because he's on a couple of the categories that she supports. In fact, he's on all of them except Universe 6, right? So she gives him 60% support as well as the rainbow orb changing. So that can be really, really good. He has, if you get the 7 orbs, that damage reduction before attacking in slot 1, which can be super good. His active skill, which gives him an extra attack and defense and attacks effective against all types, can be used from turn 4. 70% or less HP, pretty good. He's a pretty solid unit overall. I think his reasoning, he could even maybe creep up a spot or two if we start getting more buffs to his team, because Realm of Gods is very heavily driven by Saiyan units or like Zamasu and Rosé. We need a new Whis or, you know, some kind of... I mean, JP, we get the Pajamas Beerus with the EZA, who's okay, and has a different name, so you can run them together. But as it stands on what we have on Global right now, I probably wouldn't put him much higher. If you want to argue, he's maybe above 1 or 2 of the next couple of guys, maybe, but he's definitely not in like the top half of the list or anything. But Beerus can still be pretty good, especially because we do have a lot of int bosses as the hard bosses at the moment. So Beerus still very good at number 9. So number 8, we have Android 13. Android 13 is an interesting one because he can get a lot of defense by the time he transforms. He's supporting androids. The android team got a huge buff at the end of the year and definitely is looking very good going into the future. But as it stands right now, he's supporting that team. He can stack up. He can get well over 1 million defense once he's transformed into Super Android 13. So he's definitely a solid unit to run. I've seen people even running him on non-Android teams because he's another unit with big bad bosses and he stacks defense. And if you're not running him with 2 or more Android allies on the team, he can't transform, which means he will just stay as an infinite stacking unit, which is certainly an interesting way to run this unit. Let's change over to the actual Extreme Z details. Yeah, it's a very interesting way to run him. He certainly could be very interesting. Of course, on Global, we don't have really much content where you fight a Goku that's particularly relevant. That changes with the release of the anniversary, so we'll of course revise his placement once the anniversary comes out, because a lot of EZAs drop during the anniversary that are LRs. So the EZA TUR tier list, it'll be interesting to see how that's changed once all the anniversary content comes out. But as it stands now on Global, I'm fairly comfortable having this guy at 8. I would say he is pretty much a must run on the Androids team, but that team has gotten a ton of buffs. His major downside simply comes from the fact that once he transforms into Super 13, he doesn't really have any defensive tech outside of having pretty high raw defense. So he can be rocking like 1.1 million defense at the start of the turn, but then if he's getting hit by a super from like Int Omega or something, who not only hits hard with his super attack but lowers defense, which is of course the bane to all stackers or raw defense units, he can still take a ton of damage. So he's an interesting one for sure. I'm happy with him at 8. If you, like I say, if you would argue that Beerus is above him, I could probably see it. But yeah, he's definitely a solid one. So then at number 7, we have MVP 17. Again, very good on the Androids team. With the release of the Tournament of Power Androids, you could definitely argue that he's a little bit higher, with that team now getting some very interesting buffs. And of course, he probably will move up the list depending on, again, how the TUR scene is looking like after the anniversary, with all of those buffs to the Universe 7. Like the 4 major LRs of the Universe 7 team all getting EZAs during the anniversary and all being absolutely cracked. This guy would definitely work super well on the team as just a floating support. But as it stands now on Global, still very, very good. I think definitely better than 13. Of course, you can get the turns where you get caught, like if he doesn't have his extra damage reduction, if you're not below the HP threshold, then he can certainly take some big damage from some of these big attacks, but he obviously can still be very strong on the turns where he does have the full defense buff and damage reduction. He can be super tanky. So yeah, he's still very, very good. We have him here at number 7. The reason I think I swapped these guys around from my last placement. At number 6, we have the Kaioken Goku. Now, Kaioken Goku, again, it's thanks to the release of the Tournament of Power Androids and that team starting to get buffed. We can't take into account the buffs from the anniversary just yet, but because the TOP Androids require a Goku to be on rotation, and they are, you know, putting the building blocks in place for that Reps of Universe 7 team to make a comeback, or at least just, you know, the tournament participants team overall, which is what they lead. This Goku is, of course, now way better. His stocks are up. He's the Goku that they can use for their unit super. He's got another rep of Universe 7 ally that's actually decent and runnable. So yeah, this guy, stocks are up for him definitely. Still a very solid unit. He was always kind of stuck in that weird position that he got his EZA during the anniversary and it was really good, but the Universe Survival Saga team was still kind of eh. So he's, as that team starts to get buffs, he will start to improve. So I think overall, I'm happy with switching him and MVP 17's places on the list. Which means we have this guy at number 6. So Blue Kaioken Goku, of course, again, after the anniversary, he could go even higher on the list. But I think he's in a good spot here. Having that guard on the first turn, if you have a Universe Survival Saga ally, is of course a lot easier if you're running him on like double in androids. And you have MVP 17 and stuff like that, right? He's going to be very, very strong. So next up, going into number 5. We're into the top 5 now. The final one at the bottom of the top 5, Physical Super Saiyan 4 Vegito. Now, it's interesting with the heroes units. I had to rethink how I would place them because there's been a lot of discussion on Twitter and everything recently because the anniversary content is another sort of new movement forwards in power creep, and it has made the heroes team a little bit, as always happens, right, I guess, when new hard content comes out for the anniversary, it's made it a lot more difficult for the heroes team. Limit Breaker Vegito still able to carry himself and go crazy, but it's the rest of the team not being anywhere near his level and therefore making the events take a little bit longer. Kind of exposes the weaknesses of that team a little bit, but Physical Super Saiyan 4 Vegito, still very, very good. He's not only, you know, the best unit to run with Limit Breaker Super Saiyan 4 Vegito, but he's one of those units, he's one of the few heroes units that isn't really tied to being on the Heroes team as much as some of the others. Now, he does get extra attack and defense and then get damage reduction with crossover or giant 8 power allies on the team, but his support is just there, you know, giant 8 power or crossover, but you don't necessarily have to run him with those units. And of course, he has the greatly raising defense on super and has the 50% chance of countering an enemy super attack. So he has a lot of things in his kit that can be very useful. Next to Limit Breaker, Super Saiyan 4 Vegito, he's dropping like 10 million attack stats. So if you get an additional super, you're doing 2 of those, getting a pretty decent level of raw defense with a bit of damage reduction, and then a 50% chance to counter the only attacks that would do big damage to him. And again, as we've mentioned with some of the physical units already, a lot of the harder bosses on Global at the moment have int phases or are int in the final phase, like Omega. So this guy can still be very, very useful. But yeah, it's interesting because some of the Heroes units, of course, really just not great outside of the Heroes team. But I'm one of these people, when it comes to ranking units and evaluating how good they are, I'm always trying to think about them on their best team. So like if somebody says, oh, you know, Super Saiyan 4 Vegito is not good if you don't run him on the Heroes team. It's like, well, then why wouldn't I? I'm not going to not run him on the Heroes team, right? I'm going to run him on the team where he's the best, and I want to judge him by his best performance. It's like, you know, we always run units with their best partners, ideally good link partners. We run teams, well, you don't always, but run teams with support units and stuff like that. Now, I would never base a unit's placement on a tier list by saying, oh, you know, they're on a team that has some of the best support units in the game. But when you're considering like the main partner you run them with, what teams they're on in general, I feel like all of that is pieces that we put together on how to rank units. And I know a lot of people like to rank units differently. Some people rank units completely in a vacuum, and we've talked about this before. Units like LR Omega would be way higher on a tier list if you just rated them in a vacuum, but because he's tied to being on the GT Bosses team and that team is terrible, he drops down on lists by quite a few places. And this Vegito, he's at his best on a Heroes team, but the Heroes team in the current meta on Global is still very, very good, right? It no items every event in the game. So yeah, this guy at number 5. I could see him dropping, especially when the anniversary content comes out, but for now, this is where I have put him. And then at number 4, we have Future Gohan. I can't remember if I had Vegito above Future Gohan before, but Future Gohan, with the fact that the Future Saga team keeps getting buffs, is still very, very strong. This guy is supporting a lot of the units on that team. I really think the only major flaw with this Gohan is the fact that if you're below that HP threshold and he doesn't have the damage reduction, kind of like we said with MVP 17, he can then take a big chunk of damage potentially, but he does have the benefit where 17 does not, that he can have that activate mid-turn. So even if he takes like a normal and takes a bit of damage, but then that drops you below the HP threshold, then the damage reduction kicks in, and then he tanks the rest of the normals for double digits and potentially can tank a super. He greatly raises defense on super as well. And then, of course, if you have a Trunks on the team, you transform into the Super Saiyan Future Gohan, where he just has damage reduction straight up. And then, obviously, on that Future Saga team, especially with how crazy good LR Future Gohan is, he can work really, really well. I think he's one of those units where if I'm building a team where he can be run, like some version of the Future Saga team, or a Bond of Master and Disciple team, Android/Cell Saga, that kind of thing. If I'm building that kind of team, I will almost always certainly put him on the team. So to me, that is a good way of rating some of these units as well. Like a unit could have really decent performance on paper, but then when it comes to team building and link partners and stuff like that, if I'm never going to run them on my teams, then I'm probably not going to put them very high in a top 10 list, right? Especially considering, as I've said already, it is just my opinion based on my experience with the game. So Gohan, still very, very good. I have him up here at number 4. So then we have number 3 spot is Dark Mask King. Now this guy, I think I had him at number 1 on the last tier list. And a lot of this, again, comes back to the meta on Global currently. This guy on the Heroes team, which is still a super oppressive team, still super good. He only needs one Dragon Ball Heroes ally with him to be good, which means if you run him on, say, Zamasu's team with units like Super Saiyan 3 Rose and stuff like that, he can be really good. The new physical Rose just released, who leads Corroded Body and Mind, which this guy is on. He doesn't get the full 200% lead from the new Rose, but he can still be very good on that team. There's a few characters that fit onto heroes characters that fit onto there. Not a huge amount, which makes it a little bit trickier to run him on Rosé's team, because you're ideally having a Rosé on both rotations. But you could do, as I've seen people do, float one of the Rosés so you get them both together and transform one and have the other one transformed. And then the other rotation, you could have like Dark Mask King and Super Saiyan 3 Rosé, and then that works out quite nicely. So Dark Mask King's still really good. As I say, this is all based on the meta on Global, and this guy can eat a super from Fusion to Masu and then heal you back to full health straight afterwards. So something like that is incredibly valuable. Depending on how, I don't know how he would stand up against the current level of anniversary content on a 200% lead. His biggest flaw is that he has to take that first hit to get a defense buff. So if the first hit of the turn is a super, he can potentially get rocked. But it'll be interesting to see how well he will have aged when the next batch of Heroes units come out, because if the next Heroes celebration brings a bunch of units that are good for running on other teams that he's potentially on, then that gives him more options for that Heroes ally. But as I say, on the actual Heroes team itself, this guy's super good. There's almost no build of the Heroes team, I think, where I wouldn't bring this guy, unless I was just doing like a full Super Saiyan 4's team run or something, right? So this guy is still very, very valuable. And I have him at the number 3 spot. But I could see if you want to switch him and Future Gohan, if you don't put as much stock into the Heroes units, I'm sure some people would agree Future Gohan being above Vegito, but maybe would want Future Gohan above Dark Mask King as well. I could potentially see that with how crazy the Future Saga team and everything is at the moment. So definitely a solid pick for number 3, I think, Dark Mask King. But obviously let me know your thoughts down below. So then we have number 2. Now, this one is, I really wasn't sure how to put this character on the list. So I have 2 units at number 2, which might seem like a cop-out, but I don't know what to do with this character, right? Tech KEFLA, with her EZA, I mean, you could do this before, right, with the way her thing stacked up, but with the 8% dodge chance from Universe 6 or Peppy Gal's allies, which does stack, so it's 16% if the ally is a Universe 6 Peppy Gal. Tech KEFLA after her EZA on the right team build, like if we're talking about running Kale's team, or we're talking about running something like Rapid Growth, or just all these categories that Kale and KEFLA and KEFLA and stuff are on, you can build the team, or at least should build the team, I suppose I should say, in such a way where she just has a 100% chance to dodge. Now, people used to meme about her back in the day, right? Every time there's an EZA where it's a Pure Saiyan or a Universe Survival Saga character, people would always mention for like the team building guides and stuff. It's like, don't forget to bring Tech KEFLA. But now, on the right team build, like, why would you not bring her in everything? As long as if you've got the allies to stack that dodge chance up to over 100%, then yeah, she can't be hit at all. And now post EZA, if she's linked up with a decent link partner, she's dropping like 5, 6, 7 million attack stats as she starts to build up. She gets a guaranteed additional super if there's a KO on rotation with her. So then when the hidden potential comes into play, you can potentially get 3 supers with her in one turn. So she's gone from being a unit that was only really there as a tank, like let's say AGL Golden Freezer back in the day, but didn't do any damage in return, to being a unit now that will take 0 damage on the team, but also actually does do a little bit of damage. I mean, it's not crazy, right? We're now in the meta where we're sort of anything under a 10 million attack stat. If it's like a new unit or an EZA, I think people are disappointed to see. But for a unit that goes on the team and is specifically just there so that you can, like, she'll never be touched and doesn't take damage, her still being able to drop multiple 5 to 7 million attack stats as you go through the event, I think is actually very, very good. And it's interesting as well when it comes to like her hidden potential, is you don't need to give her any dodge, you don't need to give her any defensive capability whatsoever. So you can give her skill orbs that increase her attack, skill orbs obviously to give her extra additional to get those extra attacks in and get extra stacks. So she definitely can be very, very good. I think she's in a weird spot because of how, I don't want to say gimmicky, but just how like interesting her design is. Because like I say, if you're putting her on the right team, she can't take damage ever. So it's very difficult to place where she would be in a tier list, because she could almost arguably be at number 1 because she's a unit that can never get you killed. and is doing an okay amount of damage at the same time. And of course, in the future, as we get to the anniversary content, lots of events where you fight pure Saiyan enemies as well. So even with a different team build, she's going to have a 100% chance to dodge. So she's not only good now in the meta for global, which is the point of this list, as we've discussed, but she's still going to be really good in the future when the anniversary stuff starts coming out, which I think is super valuable. But it'll be interesting to see how the meta shifts and everything. But as of right now on global, these Universe 6 EZAs are just incredibly good. So yeah, KEFLA, arguably number 2, potentially even arguably number 1. But taking her out of the mix, the sort of the 2 slot would go to Zamasu. I know a lot of people have had him at 1 for a while. He is definitely still a very good unit, and the release of the physical Rosé is another big buff for him because he goes on that team, another good link partner or support. He gets the support from the domain. So once he's transformed into his second form, because his first turn is where he can get caught. So you kind of have to be careful. Sometimes you can just get super unlucky. But once he's transformed, he has 50% damage reduction. And then if you consider, like, he could be on, if he's on turn 2, or even like in slot 7, he comes in and transforms straight away. But if he's on turn 2, he'll be transforming into the Fusion Zamasu on turn 4. And then already immediately you can potentially be using the Rosé domain, which is giving him a 20% buff on top of his stats already. He can do multiple additional supers that stack his defense, and then he's doing all of that while having the 50% damage reduction. So he is still very, very good. Again, his first turn is his biggest weakness, so especially against Fusion Zamasu with the AoEs, he can be a struggle sometimes. But against Omega, whilst the first phase is tech, because he can be attack lowered and isn't AoEing straight away, you can get this guy in slot 2 or 3 if he's on the first turn. Otherwise he comes in and usually is in a pretty good setup, and once he started transforming, he's really good. I usually don't use his final transformation unless it's like the finisher turn, because he can do a ton of extra damage, but he loses out on some of the defense and some of the damage reduction. But that transformed finisher turn, again, can look really crazy when you have him on the Rosé team and Rosé's domain is active and he's getting all of those extra stats. Then, of course, he can absolutely just hit like a truck. So definitely very, very good. Very strong unit still. Have him at number 2, so it should be no surprise who is at number 1, and that is STR KEFLA. STR KEFLA's design is crazy. I feel like out of all the units from this celebration, like, people have their complaints about Rosé, some of them very valid. His design certainly is confusing, is a word I would use for it. But KEFLA absolutely feels like she is a character designed for like the anniversary content, right? She is an anniversary level EZA. She is that good. So she is like hands down the best unit, best EZA TUR on global. If we included EZA units in just a normal top 10 TUR list, she might actually be number 1. Better than like God Goku, Limit Breaker Vegito, potentially, 23rd World Tournament Goku Piccolo, for certain content, right? Because you need to pick up your orbs in order to get the guaranteed additional super, but she now has the high chance to dodge is only restricted to 3 orbs instead of 6, which is considerably easier to get, as well as getting a crazy attack buff as well. So turn 1, she's dropping well over 10 mil. I've seen like 12 million attack stats on turn 1 from her. And then she's getting additional supers. If you get 6 orbs, you could then get the hidden potential as well. So triple super in 1 turn. And then as she transforms up through the different forms, all of those buffs just get higher and higher. The orb restriction gets lower and lower. And then when you get to Super Saiyan 2, you're getting a ton of extra stats with 2 orbs, an additional super with 4 orbs, and then another additional super and extra crit and dodge chance with 6 orbs. So with 6 orbs, she's got a 70% chance to dodge. She's got a 20% chance to crit, as well as a separate 10% chance to crit, regardless of her hidden potential, because she's an STR unit. And she's doing a guaranteed 3 supers on that turn. So then you could get the hidden potential and do 4 supers, all of which throughout all of her forms are stacking attack. So by the time you get to Super Saiyan 2, she's dropping like 20 million attack stats. I did a run for the UI Goku Burst mode, which should be up on the channel already, using her as the leader for the rapid growth mission, and on a double 170 lead, she's still dropping over 20 million attack stats as the Super Saiyan 2 KEFLA, whilst having 70% chance to dodge if you picked up the 6 orbs, which is pretty crazy. And as we talked about on the podcast last night, she's only going to get better as well, because when the 50% support units get their EZA, STR Kaba is going to be on her team, and he is an STR support unit for 60% and creates STR orbs. So she's going to be even more crazy. But that's, again, we're not factoring in stuff that's not out on global. And she is #1 EZA TUR right now, and she's only going to get better when that Kabe or Kaba EZA comes out, right? So that is absolutely crazy. So that is the top 10 list. If we switch over to, I think I need the more zoomed in view. There we go. So there's the top 10 list as it looks with the way we've gone through in the video. At number 10, in contention for 10 or honorable mention, whichever you want to say, Int Goku Black, Physical Piccolo, and the Int Vados. Number 9, Physical Beerus. 8, AGL 13. 7, Physical Android 17. 6, Blue Kaioken Goku. 5, Super Saiyan 4 Vegito. 4, Int Future Gohan. 3, Dark Mask King. And then number 2, AGL Zamasu, or is it Tech KEFLA? She could even be number 1, maybe. And then number 1 is STR KEFLA. Because, you know, with KEFLA, it's so difficult to place, because you could say she should be number 1 just because she can't take any damage. But, like, KEFLA, while she could take some damage, she's got a 50% chance to dodge. Post super, she can be over 1 million defense, but she's dropping such ridiculous attacks that she can just blitz through phases of these events almost by herself. So I guess when it comes to Tech KEFLA, if you want to use the argument that she should be this high on the list because solely of the ability to take no damage, then I guess she is actually in contention for being at number 1 with KEFLA, but it's just really difficult to place like where I would put them. So I think overall I like KEFLA more, but if you're going to run Kale's team and you want Kale's team to work at its full potential, you're going to be running Tech KEFLA all the time. You're always going to be running KEFLA too, because she's the best unit on the team. But like if you don't have KEFLA, Kale's team will still work because Tech KEFLA works as a great slot 1 partner for her. But if you don't have Tech KEFLA, it makes Kale's team much more difficult to use because she's that definite must-run slot 1 unit. So yeah, really tricky to decide with Tech KEFLA what to do. But that is the list as it looks for me for global for top 10 EZA TURs. As I said at the start, just my opinion. If you disagree, that's cool. Just let me know down below in the comments where you would change the list. As long as people, like I said, are civil and people are cool about it, I'm perfectly happy for people to disagree. I've even had people change my mind from discussions in the comment section before. So just be cool and let me know your thoughts. If you want to give me your specific list of how you would do your top 10, I'd be interested to see that in the comments down below. So yeah, just let me know. But I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know all the thoughts in the comments. So that is going to be it for the video, guys. This has been the Masked Ningen. Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel if you are new. Check out the list down below for the Discord and the merch store, and I will see you all again soon. Have a good one.